Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to another episode of Embrace the Opposite. I'm your host, Andrew Wormsley, doing my best to be swell. Remember, that's the acronym from last week. Best spouse who ever lived. That's what I'm trying to do, and I'm hoping you guys are trying to do the same out there. A couple housekeeping things before we get into the video today. If this is your first time, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can get the updates on all the videos moving forward. If you've been here before, guys, please continue to like and subscribe if the video compels you to do so. So, last week we talked about intimacy as a whole, just how we seek it out in our relationships, why it's important, and how we can help that really take our relationship to the next level. So we're gonna stick with the theme of intimacy here on today's episode. But guys, we're going to be talking about physical intimacy, which is a hot topic for most couples. I think just across the board, you can always find that as a talking point with couples. There's always maybe one person who desires physical intimacy more than the other. But what I want to do is I want to kind of break down some of the misconceptions around physical intimacy and really how I define it, and moving forward, how we still think physical intimacy is connected to the relationship and how it can help you do your best and get the most out of your relationship. So a couple things on that, personal to myself. So I'm a huge advocate for physical intimacy in my marriage. When I'm talking to other couples, I think it's the lifeblood of your relationship. It's truly important. But I know that it's not that same for everybody. So for myself, for example, coming into my marriage, I knew physical intimacy was important, but I didn't know how important it was, and I learned a lot. My wife is also a huge advocate for it, and there were things surrounding how we connect, and not just sex, but just hand holding. Anything that has to do with physical touch, right? One of the love languages that we've talked about in earlier episodes. So anything that has to do with that, these were things that I wasn't too keen on. Obviously, sex is a no-brainer, but everything else in between, and then also our frequency, with connecting sexually, it was just all over the place, and we weren't succinct on that. So there was a lot that I had to learn in putting a lot of importance on physical intimacy. In a couple, one of you is at a place where you really put a lot of emphasis on physical intimacy and the other person doesn't. You really have this opportunity there to make your weakness your strength. And really, I think what's about that is finding the core root of why you are at one end of the spectrum or the other. So even if you're at the end where you have a higher sexual drive and your partner doesn't, well, both of you guys need to go into the lab and figure out why you are the way that you are, talk about it, be intimate emotionally and through your conversations, and try to figure out the best middle ground for you guys to move forward. But there's a lot of fear and anxiety around being intimate, and that's on the emotional level, but it's also on the physical level. Typically, we learn about relationships from a physical intimacy perspective by looking at porn, and by understanding and seeing the affection that our parents had on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes that really can throw you off, and I think it can throw you off. Obviously, looking at pornography, there are all sorts of expectations that come with that, how people should be, how you're supposed to act when you're being intimate, and really that's for, just like regular movies, that's for promoting the sale and the promotion of the movie, right? It's not actually real life, and it's not actually how things are done. And I think we need to begin to look at that and say, okay, there's this division of teaching each other, or how we teach ourselves physical intimacy, and it's involved in this fantasy world. What happens is we get wrapped up into that as viewers of that, especially at a young age. Myself, the first time I saw pornography was about 9 or 10 years old. And so I had to, once I got into my marriage, I had to detach from some of those things that I learned and really begin to invest in the reality of intimacy, which is being vulnerable, which is being open, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But we really gotta reprogram ourselves when it comes to that. We got to do away with the fear. We got to do away with the anxiety, and really promote this individual that I'm connecting with. What's the best way for us to connect? What's the best way for us to have a physically intimate relationship? And then to talk about our parents, well, we can see our parents show affection on a day-to-day basis. That's going to be great. I think that's awesome. I myself did not experience that. My parents, they weren't giving each other kisses and being affectionate at all times. And so coming into my marriage, my wife is someone who her love language is physical touch. So for me, I had to reprogram myself in a lot of ways, and I had to say, okay, well, I know I've seen this, but that's not necessarily going to be the best mode of operation for my marriage. So I got to reprogram myself, and I got to handle things a little bit differently. So we got to make sure that we're looking at that. We can't just take what we've learned and said, oh, well, you got to get on board with this method. If you really want a fruitful and awesome relationship, guys, you really got to examine that and see what's the best mode of physical intimacy or physical touch that you can have with your partner to promote growth and success in your relationship. So there's really 4 things that I want to talk about today that are that fall under the umbrella of how we can promote physical intimacy in our lives, and how can we use it to further our relationships and build success in our relationships. And the first point is going to be emotional intimacy leads to physical intimacy. So just like with anything, the more transparent you are with your partner, the better communication that you have with your partner, the better and the closer that you guys are going to be. This is what we talked about last week. We gave the example of when you're upset, not just being upset in the moment, but thinking about and doing the pre-work ahead of time that says, you know what, I get upset in these sorts of situations. So before I get upset, let me talk with my partner, let me share what's going on inside of me and why I am that way. And let's talk about best practices to work our way through that. Well, that's more of an emotional intimacy, which is so very important because it's directly correlated to how your relationship is going to be on the intimacy sides physically. And that's including hand holding, including how often you guys touch, including how often you're affectionate, and on top of that, including what your sex life is like. So if you show me a couple who isn't connecting sexually, then I can probably make some identifying facts about how they are emotionally. Now, it's not in every case. I understand that some people are perfectly fit to where they don't connect. There isn't one partner who wants to, both partners don't want to as often, and then you have emotionally, you guys talk and you connect and you have a great connection, and that's great. Majority of the time though, if there is issues in the relationship from a sexual perspective, meaning that there, for one reason or another, we're not connecting, then there's probably going to be some issues just on your everyday lives and on an emotional perspective. So we really got to connect emotionally. We got to share what's going on inside. We got to do the work that we talked about last week so that we can promote the intimacy. If a person is not happy, if a person feels unloved, if a person feels unwanted or misunderstood on a daily basis, even if you connect sexually, even if you connect holding hands and these sorts of things, you're not really going to get the most out of your relationship. A person needs to feel like they can open up, that they can be transparent, that they can be there can be trust with the other person. And when that's taken care of, then you're leading to the first steps to be able to glean what it is that physical intimacy can do for me. Number 2, being intimate physically does not equal physical intimacy. And what I mean by that, guys, is it's not just sex. I was thinking about this and the best way to describe it. So, think about going to a therapist. When you go to a therapist, the goal is for you to share, for you to put out a lot of what's inside so that the therapist can help you and give you best practices to improve your life, improve your circumstance or situation. So the goal is to reveal some of yourself, right? Well, that's not going to happen in the first session. It may not happen in the second session or the third or the fourth or the fifth. It's going to take time. And it's going to take time for that therapist to listen to you, listen how you share, what you've gone through in your life, the ups and the downs, and then establish a means for you to work through it, right? So it takes time. So when we're relating that to physical intimacy, a one-night stand or casual sex, those are out there and everybody can do them, and I know in this age it happens quite frequently, but those are not going to lead to physical intimacy. It takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes understanding, and it takes knowing the person on an emotional level and on a physical level for physical intimacy to really bloom and sprout in your life and in your relationship. So the two are not the same. Point number 3, you can't have physical intimacy in a relationship just by yourself. It takes two to tango. It takes two to have physical intimacy. So this is where I want to motivate you guys. You got to fight for transparency in your relationship. If you're upset and your partner's upset and you argue and you both go into separate rooms and you close and slam the door, well, where does the work happen to understand where that person was hurt, where that person felt disrespected or didn't feel loved or didn't feel appreciated? We always got to go back and we got to take care of that. And so if one person has this very high sex drive and and that person is connecting with their partner on an everyday basis, twice a day, whatever it might be, well, how does the other person feel? Are they in the same place? Do they feel appreciated and loved and heard? And is their place in terms of intimacy, is that being put into the relationship to develop the whole? Or is one person just dominating the frequency of connecting sexually, how we hold hands, how we sit together at a restaurant? We're both on the same side, and that's the way it's going to be, period. You gotta hear the other person out, and you have to develop a means for you guys to move forward together. Okay? So to reach full, true, mature physical intimacy, two people have to be involved in that decision. It can't just be one person driving the ship. Both people have to be heard. Both perspectives of what physical intimacy is have to be put onto the table, and then you develop something from there. And number 4 leads right into that. Frequency and understanding that everybody's different. Okay, so going back to the example of one partner having a higher sex drive than the other, one partner wanting to really go after physical intimacy more than the other person, you got to remember that everybody's different. Okay, and this is a pain point for a lot of couples. You know, it's rare that both couples are equally matched in terms of the amount of sex that they want to have. This is rare. And so to really examine this and get to a place to where you guys can mesh, you got to understand that everybody's different, and that where I'm at in terms of my sex drive may not be where my partner is. And you have to develop again, that middle ground. You have to understand, okay, I know that this person is different than me, and so that energy exists. How can I harmonize, okay, a word that we discussed in the past, how can I harmonize with this energy and make it create a beautiful note so that my partner and I can develop a truly intimate relationship, a truly physical intimate relationship where we're connecting and we're both being open and transparent. I don't know everything about relationships, but I do know this. If you're in a relationship and you make your partner feel like their words are not heard, and when they say something, you don't bring it into the relationship and work on it together and make it be valuable, you're not going to be able to reach the be swell level. You got to make sure that your partner feels like their words are being heard, and then you're actually doing things to promote their perspective as well. Guys, that's what I wanted to share today. I hope it was helpful. Remember to be swell, embrace the opposite, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.